Welcome to Jordan Pierce Stories, where the most dramatic and inspiring stories come to life. Today, you're about to witness an unbelievable journey. A single dad janitor, struggling through long days of hard work, suddenly caught in the middle of a massive Wall Street scandal. From being overlooked and underestimated, he faced betrayal, humiliation, and the cruelty of the powerful. Yet hidden within this scandal was the very key that allowed him to flip his destiny. Step by step, he turned pain into strength, and shockingly into billions. Every twist, every revelation in this story will keep you breathless, emotional, and hooked until the very end. Can a single dad really rise from nothing to billionaire status? And what price did he have to pay? Stay tuned, because this story will take you from one jaw-dropping moment to the next. And if you love powerful, life-changing stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another dramatic journey. New York. A December morning so cold the breath turned into white smoke. While office workers rushed into their gleaming glass towers with hot coffee in hand, down in the basement of the very same building, a man bent over, gripping a worn-out mop, dragging long strokes across the tiled floor. That man was Marcus Johnson, 40 years old, a single father raising an 8-year-old boy named Elijah. To the outside world, he was just a janitor in a faded blue uniform, shoes worn at the heel, sweat soaking through the back of his shirt. But to Elijah, he was the whole world. Marcus often joked with his son, "I'm no superhero, but if there's ever an Olympic medal for fastest floor mopping in New York, your dad's taking home the gold," Elijah would giggle. But deep down, Marcus carried a constant weight. Rent, bills, school expenses, each one stacked on his shoulders like stones. Every night, after his late shift, Marcus would sit silently at the small kitchen table, staring at the pile of unpaid bills as if they could talk, mocking him. "Think you'll ever escape? You're just a janitor." But Marcus wasn't the kind of man to break easily. He had a sharp, sarcastic humor that often turned on himself. Each morning, as he polished the lobby floors of Harrington and Culkin's, a high-profile financial firm, he would mutter under his breath, "Here it is, the wealthy sliding across floors so shiny you could eat off them. Do they even realize this Wall Street shine cost me cracked hands and a broken back?" Sometimes, young employees in tailored suits strutted past, tossing him a look of disdain, as if he were invisible. Marcus, though, was used to it. He met their gaze with a mix of pity and irony. He knew he didn't own a $1,000 suit, but he had something most of them didn't: the unconditional love of his son. Then one morning, while scrubbing footprints off the marble floor, Marcus overheard two senior staff whispering. Their voices were hushed, but to a man accustomed to echoes in hallways, it was loud enough. "Did you hear? If that investment leaks, the whole firm could collapse. Shh, keep your voice down. You want to get fired? If Harrington finds out someone overheard, game over." Marcus froze mid-swipe, his heart pounding. A shady investment? A secret buried right in the building where he mopped floors every day? He chuckled softly, though not out of amusement. Perfect. Wall Street might be on the verge of collapse, and I can't even afford a sandwich for my kid. That's life, huh? Yet deep inside, his instincts told him this wasn't just idle gossip. This was the beginning of something far bigger. And Marcus had just stumbled onto the edge of a secret that could change his life forever. Marcus stood frozen, the mop dripping water onto the floor. For a moment, the whole world seemed to pause. He wasn't usually the nosy type, but curiosity crept into his mind, impossible to ignore. A shady investment? A secret powerful enough to shake Harrington and Co. to its core? He glanced around. Nobody noticed him. To them, he was just a shadow, a nameless janitor. And yet, that invisibility was his advantage. He told himself, if no one sees me, then it's easier for me to overhear what they never want revealed. As the two employees walked away, Marcus pretended to scrub harder, though his ears were still sharp as knives. His heart pounded, caught between thrill and dread. He didn't know if what he overheard would lead him to opportunity or drag him into ruin. That evening, when he got home, Elijah leapt into his arms, as always. "Dad, was today fun?" Marcus smiled, acting as though nothing had changed. He didn't want his son to carry the weight of his worries. But watching Elijah hunched over his homework at the old wooden desk, Marcus thought, if I can uncover the truth, maybe this is the chance to change his life forever. Over a modest dinner of canned noodles and stale bread, Marcus chewed and plotted. Somehow, he had to learn more about this investment. He once believed his life was written in stone, mopping floors in the morning, coming home at night, scraping by to pay bills at the end of each month. But today, fate had tossed him a fragment of a key, and for the first time in years, Marcus felt a flicker of ambition ignite inside his chest. He smirked to himself. How ironic. What can a janitor possibly do? But maybe it's the ones nobody notices who get the clearest view of the truth. In the dimly lit apartment, Marcus clenched his fist. He didn't yet know where this path would lead, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going to let this secret slip away. In the days that followed, Marcus started paying closer attention to everything around him. He no longer just bowed his head to mop the floors. His eyes and ears were wide open, catching every whisper, every door that slammed shut in the executive wing. One time, while pushing his cleaning cart past the executive offices, Marcus spotted Mr. Harrington, the firm's chairman, heading into a conference room with a group of men in black suits. Their faces were tight, as if they'd just buried a body somewhere. The door shut, and soon after, furious arguments echoed from inside. Marcus pretended to fuss with a trash bag, but in his head he thought, "Oh, Wall Street is fascinating. They spend millions polishing their image, yet one tiny crack shows the mess they're really made of." That night at home, Elijah was watching TV when he asked, "Dad, what's Wall Street? I keep hearing it on the news, but I don't get it." Marcus laughed, answering half joking, half serious. "Wall Street? It's like a giant casino where the rich gamble with sums of money we could never make in a lifetime. And you know who cleans the floor of that casino? Me." Elijah burst out laughing, but Marcus fell silent after saying it. He realized his joke carried a bitter truth. In his mind, the puzzle pieces began to connect. The overheard conversation, the executives' tense faces, the recent headlines about the market plunging. Something was wrong. Something massive was about to explode. Marcus knew he stood at a dangerous crossroads. On one side, a familiar life, poor but safe. On the other, the dark secrets of the powerful, something that could crush anyone who got too close. But just then, he heard Elijah mumble sleepily, "I believe in you, Dad. You can do anything." Marcus looked at his son drifting into sleep, clutching a worn-out teddy bear. His chest tightened. He no longer had a choice. If there was even the slightest chance to change their lives, he would take it. For Elijah. That night, Marcus tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The old fan rattled in the corner of their tiny apartment while Elijah had long drifted into deep slumber. In the dark, Marcus stared at the yellowed ceiling, his mind spinning with thoughts. He replayed every detail, the hushed conversation, the tense faces in the boardroom, the news headlines flashing across the TV. He didn't understand everything, but he was certain of one thing. A financial bomb was about to explode, and if he stayed silent, he would remain nothing more than a shadow in this world. Marcus let out a quiet laugh, though it carried more bitterness than humor. How absurd! A janitor, hands reeking of bleach, daring to think about crossing the same path as men who control billions. But then, his eyes drifted to Elijah, curled up under a thin blanket. Marcus whispered softly, "You deserve a better future than this, and if no one gives me a chance, then I'll create one myself." The next morning, when he arrived at Harrington & Co., Marcus no longer walked with the same invisible shuffle. Inside him burned a strange new fire, fear mixed with excitement. He knew he had to start noticing everything. Who entered the boardroom? What was said behind those closed doors? Which documents were carelessly left on the table? From that day forward, Marcus wasn't just a janitor anymore. He became the silent guardian of secrets, and he silently vowed, one day, what he discovered would become the key to a door he had never dared to imagine opening. A week later, Marcus began noticing subtle changes inside Harrington & Co. The executives were constantly locked in closed-door meetings, while senior staff seemed restless, flinching at every shadow as if someone was watching them. One late evening, while mopping the hallway, Marcus spotted a folder left carelessly on a bench outside the boardroom. His heart raced. Normally, he would have just picked it up, placed it neatly on a desk, and moved on. But tonight, he sat down and glanced at the cover. It read, "Project Black River, Confidential." Marcus froze. The word confidential glared at him like a flashing red light. He looked around. The hallway was empty, filled only with the hum of the air conditioner. His hand trembling, he cracked the folder open. Pages of charts, numbers, and jargon spilled out, most of it beyond his understanding. But one phrase repeated again and again: Harrington Offshore Holdings. He didn't fully grasp what it meant, but he could sense danger. This wasn't just an ordinary document. This was the first puzzle piece of the dark picture he had stumbled into. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from down the hall. Marcus quickly closed the folder and placed it back exactly where it had been. As a senior employee approached, Marcus resumed his usual posture, the invisible janitor, mop in hand. But inside, the fire of ambition roared stronger than ever. He thought to himself, "All right, Harrington, if you're playing dirty, remember this. Right beneath your feet, there's someone watching every move." Marcus couldn't focus on his work after seeing that folder. The words Black River pounded in his head like a relentless drumbeat. He felt as though he had stepped into a game where no one bothered to explain the rules. The next day, Marcus decided to pay closer attention. He noticed that every late evening, several senior executives slipped out of the building with heavy leather briefcases, their faces tighter than usual. Once, he even heard a man shouting inside the boardroom, "This is financial crime! If anyone finds out, we're all finished." Marcus nearly dropped his mop bucket when he heard that. He realized what he had stumbled upon wasn't just a company issue. It could be a scandal of national scale. That night at home, Marcus muttered to himself while washing dishes, "All I ever wanted was to give my kid a proper meal, and now I'm caught in this circus. Fate sure knows how to mess with me." But then he looked up and saw Elijah, scribbling cars with an old pencil. In his son's innocent eyes, Marcus found his resolve. If this secret could be the chance to change their lives, he would step into the dangerous game. He had no money, no power, but he did have one advantage: no one took him seriously. And in a world full of schemes, sometimes invisibility was the greatest weapon of all. Marcus began turning his janitorial duties into an excuse to linger near the important areas. He mopped slower outside the boardroom, emptied trash bins later than usual in the executive halls, and every time his ears worked like radar. One Friday night, when the building was nearly empty, Marcus pushed his cart near the boardroom. The door was slightly ajar, warm yellow light spilling into the hallway. He stopped, pretending to scrub a stain on the floor. Inside, Harrington's furious voice boomed, "You think I spent tens of millions covering this up just to let one slip-up ruin us? Black River must remain airtight. If not, this entire empire crumbles." Marcus held his breath. He didn't understand everything, but one thing was clear. Black River wasn't just an investment. It was a massive conspiracy. Just then, heavy footsteps echoed from the far end of the hall. Marcus panicked. A security guard was approaching. He quickly straightened up, pushed his cart along, and whistled casually as if nothing was wrong. The guard gave him a passing glance and moved on. Marcus's heart still pounded wildly. He knew one misstep could drag him into a deadly storm. Yet in his eyes, alongside fear, there was a strange glimmer: excitement. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just the invisible man. He was the sole witness to a secret Wall Street would kill to keep hidden. Marcus returned to the supply closet, shut the door tight behind him, and collapsed into the old chair. His heart was still racing, sweat dripping down his forehead despite the winter chill outside. He knew now what he had overheard wasn't just office gossip. It was real, a secret so dangerous that if exposed, it could bring down Harrington and Co., maybe even shake all of Wall Street. He ran his hands through his hair and let out a bitter laugh. Insane. A broke janitor accidentally holding the knife that could pierce the heart of a billion-dollar empire. But the laugh faded quickly. Fear crept in. If he stayed silent, life would go on. Mornings mopping floors, nights eating canned noodles with his son, stuck in the same loop forever. But if he stepped forward, he would be putting both his life and Elijah's in danger. Marcus stood, staring at his faint reflection in the dusty mirror. He told himself, "Sometimes to give your kid a better future, you have to be bolder than the men who think they run the world." That night, as he left the building, Marcus looked up at the glowing windows high above. Inside sat the men who pulled strings with numbers, commanding the fate of millions. And there he was, a nameless janitor, quietly stepping into a game they never saw coming. From that moment on, Marcus knew. He had made his choice. There was no turning back. In the days that followed, Marcus lived in a haze between fear and obsession. By day he still mopped floors, emptied trash, and replaced plastic liners, but his mind was consumed by the secret called Black River. He began noticing every small detail: shifty glances, urgent phone calls, thick binders exchanged late at night. One evening, while collecting trash on the 20th floor, Marcus found a crumpled piece of paper in a bin. He unfolded it, and his eyes locked onto the words: "Transfer funds offshore. Avoid audit." Marcus froze. He might not understand all the financial jargon, but any ordinary mind could see this was illegal. These men weren't just hiding shady investments, they were laundering money. He quickly stuffed the paper into his pocket, his heart hammering like he had just stolen something forbidden. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt he held something worth more than millions: evidence. Back home, Marcus spread the paper out on the table. Elijah peeked over and asked curiously, "Dad, what's that?" Marcus hastily folded it up, smiling to reassure him. "Nothing, son. Just thinking of a better way to mop the floors." Elijah laughed and ran off to play. But Marcus knew the truth. From this moment on, he wasn't just a janitor anymore. He had stepped into a war where the other side was a financial empire, and if he was in the fight, he wasn't backing down. After finding that paper, Marcus became more cautious than ever. He didn't just listen and observe, he started recording. Each night, once Elijah was asleep, Marcus pulled out an old notebook and carefully wrote down every detail: names, times, even fragments of overheard conversations. He knew his memory could fail him, but ink on paper wouldn't lie. One night, while cleaning the basement archives, Marcus stumbled upon a forgotten box of files. Inside were thick contracts filled with signatures, seals, and most importantly, lists of offshore shell companies. Marcus couldn't fully understand it all, but he felt as though he was holding a map that led straight to the heart of the Black River scheme. He let out a bitter laugh. How ironic. The MBAs and finance PhDs keep this buried, yet a janitor picking through the trash sees the real picture. Still, his worry grew heavier. If he was uncovering this much, sooner or later someone would notice. And when men with money and power feel threatened, they'll do anything to silence anyone, even a poor janitor with nothing to lose. Marcus knew the danger was closing in, but deep inside, another thought echoed. Maybe this is the only chance I'll ever get to escape poverty, and if not for myself, then at least for Elijah. One late afternoon, as Marcus collected trash in the upper floor hallway, he felt eyes on him. Turning, he saw a security guard standing at a distance, arms crossed, watching him longer than usual. Marcus swallowed hard, pretending nothing was wrong, though his heart thudded violently. From that day on, he noticed he was being watched. Sometimes a senior staff member stared at him as he cleaned. Other times a guard would stroll by and casually ask, "Hey Marcus, notice anything unusual lately? A lot of sensitive stuff going on around here." Marcus forced a smirk, replying with his trademark sarcasm, "Yeah, the weirdest thing is the bathroom on the 15th floor keeps clogging. Other than that, nothing at all." Outwardly, he played it cool. But inside, Marcus knew someone was getting suspicious. Black River wasn't just a project, it was a lifeline, and the men guarding it wouldn't allow a janitor poking around to walk away untouched. That night at home, when Elijah ran up and hugged him, Marcus felt the weight of fear pressing hard on his chest. He wondered, am I dragging both of us into a pit we can't escape? Yet then Elijah whispered, "Dad, I know one day you won't have to work so hard anymore." Marcus bit down on his lip. That innocent faith from his son made him realize, no matter the danger, he had to keep going. If not now, then never. That night, when the building was nearly empty, Marcus returned to the basement to finish collecting trash. He expected it to be uneventful, but the moment he stepped in, he froze. The trash bin he always emptied was gone. In its place sat a sleek black folder bag neatly placed on the table. Marcus walked closer. On the bag lay a single slip of paper with just 4 words. "Don't get too curious." His blood ran cold. Someone knew he had been sniffing around Black River. The whole basement seemed to press in on him, the buzzing fluorescent lights above growing louder in his ears. He quickly folded the note and shoved it deep into his pocket. In that instant, Marcus realized he was invisible no longer. Someone, up in those glass towers, had begun to notice him. As he stepped out of the building, the night wind cut across his face. He looked up at the glowing windows high above. He knew from this moment on the game was no longer safe. Yet in his eyes, a strange determination sparked. They may have money, power, but I've got something they don't. Nothing left to lose. With that silent vow, Marcus walked on, carrying both fear and the faint belief that he had just stepped fully into the greatest battle of his life. After that night's warning, Marcus lived in a state of both tension and strange exhilaration. He knew an invisible hand was watching his every move, but instead of backing down, it only confirmed he was heading in the right direction. The next day, while mopping the lobby floor, a stranger in a black suit approached. He stopped, eyed Marcus up and down, then spoke in a tone half threatening, half mocking. "Your job is to mop floors, not poke around your superior's business. Keep your mouth shut if you want to stay safe." Marcus smiled, ran the mop across the shiny marble one more time, then looked up and replied with biting sarcasm, "Oh, don't worry. The only thing I'm curious about is why rich men like you leave so many dirty footprints." The man frowned, said nothing more, and walked off. Marcus bent down again, hiding a bitter grin. He knew someone was testing him, and his answer was clear. He wouldn't back down. That night at home, Elijah sat beside him doing homework while Marcus opened his notebook, adding to the dense pages of notes. Every suspicious glance, every vague threat, every small detail, he turned it all into evidence for the hidden war he was fighting. Marcus whispered to himself, "They think I'm just a poor janitor who won't fight back." Wrong. Corner a prey long enough, and it learns how to strike. A week later, Marcus received an anonymous call. A raspy male voice came through the line. "Mr. Johnson, we know you've been hearing more than a janitor should. Meet me tonight. Basement parking lot. Alone." Marcus gripped the phone tight, his heart pounding. Part of him wanted to throw it away and pretend he'd never heard it. But another part, the part pushing him forward, whispered, "This might be your chance to learn more." That night, the parking lot was nearly empty, lit only by flickering yellow lights reflecting off the cold concrete. Marcus walked in, hands shoved in his coat pockets. From the shadows, a man emerged. Not Harrington, but a senior staffer Marcus had glimpsed before in the boardroom. "You shouldn't be involved in this," the man said, eyes darting nervously. "Black River, it's not just a financial project. It's tied to politics, to people you do not want to cross." Marcus narrowed his eyes and asked, "If it's so dangerous, then why are you standing here telling me this?" The man paused, then whispered, "Because I'm sick of it too. But be careful. They won't hesitate to make you truly invisible, in the literal sense." With that, he shoved a business card into Marcus's hand and disappeared into the shadows. Marcus looked down, only initials and a phone number. For the first time, Marcus had an ally, or at least someone wavering inside the enemy's ranks, but it also meant he had just stepped one level deeper into a deadly game. Marcus barely slept that night. The business card with the initials RK and a phone number sat on the table, burning in his sight. He saw it both as an opportunity and as a trap waiting to snap shut. The next morning, when Elijah asked, "Dad, why are your eyes so red?" Marcus just patted his son's head with a faint smile. "Stayed up late cleaning, that's all." But in truth, one question kept echoing in his mind. Should I call that number? Finally, that evening, once Elijah was asleep, Marcus picked up the phone and dialed. On the other end, a familiar voice answered. The same man from the parking garage. "You called. That means you want the truth," RK's low voice said. Marcus replied, "I'm no detective, no hero. I'm just a janitor trying to protect my son." "And that's exactly what makes you the most dangerous," RK murmured, "because you've got nothing to lose." The conversation lasted only minutes. RK revealed that Black River was in fact an international money laundering network, with ties to politics and figures deep inside government. He didn't give too many details, but enough for Marcus to realize he wasn't just up against a financial firm. He was up against a vast machine that could crush anyone in its path. Marcus sat in silence for a long while before finally saying, "If I keep going, it'll be dangerous, but if I walk away, I'll never forgive myself." On the other end, RK sighed, "Then your choice is made. But remember, from here on out, every step must be calculated. One mistake, and it's over." Marcus hung up and sat quietly in the dark. He knew there was no turning back. But for the first time, he wasn't alone. After the call with RK, Marcus felt himself sucked deeper into a whirlpool he could no longer control. Every step he took inside Harrington & Co. now felt like walking on thin ice with a bottomless abyss beneath. One night, after finishing the hallway, Marcus discovered his supply closet had been ransacked. His notebooks were gone. Panic shot through him, his heart dropping into his stomach. There was no doubt now. Someone knew he was keeping tabs, and this was a warning louder than any note left on a folder. Marcus collapsed into a chair, burying his head in his hands. For a moment he wanted to quit. Thinking of Elijah, of his son's future, he wondered, if I keep going, am I dragging him into danger too? But then RK's words echoed in his mind. You've got nothing to lose. Marcus clenched his fists. Yes, he had nothing to lose except Elijah, and it was for Elijah that he couldn't quit. He would fight, not to be a hero, but so that one day Elijah could hold his head high and say, "My dad never gave up." As he left the building, Marcus looked up at the New York sky blanketed in clouds. He knew with certainty the way back was gone. From here on, there was only one path left, to face it head on. After losing all his notebooks, Marcus realized he could no longer just overhear or pick up scraps. If he wanted the truth, he had to step in. That night, Marcus called RK again. This time, the man's voice was urgent rather than cautious. "Mr. Johnson, we don't have much time. They're wiping everything clean. If we're going to act, it has to be now." Marcus took a deep breath and replied, "I need solid evidence. What I've got is just scraps of paper. If we're going to expose Black River, I need something undeniable." There was a pause before RK said, "There's a hard drive in Harrington's office. It contains every secret transaction, but it's heavily guarded. Only the executives are allowed near it. If you get it, Harrington and his whole network are finished." Marcus let out a bitter laugh. "Sounds as easy as cleaning another toilet." "No," RK said coldly, "far more dangerous. But if you want to change your fate, this is your only chance." Marcus hung up and sat quietly in the dark. He knew if he did this, he wasn't just risking himself. He was dragging Elijah into the storm. But then he remembered his son's eyes and those innocent words. "Dad, you won't have to work so hard forever." Marcus clenched his fists. Yes, it was time. From an invisible janitor, he would take his first step into a war against a financial empire. Marcus knew breaking into Harrington's office was like walking straight into the lion's den. But he also understood one thing. Inside this building, he was the only person with a legitimate reason to go almost anywhere. The boardroom, the hallways, even the executive offices, because no one paid attention to a janitor. In the days that followed, Marcus began writing his script. He noted what time Harrington usually stayed late, when the guards switched shifts, which cameras glitched or lagged a few seconds. Every tiny detail he memorized, as if preparing for the most important performance of his life. Sometimes, he stood in front of the supply room mirror, holding his mop like a rifle, practicing his walk, his posture, even his nervous smile. He muttered sarcastically to himself, "Insane, Marcus. Who'd believe a 40-year-old janitor with bleached scars on his hands is about to steal $1 billion secret?" That night, after Elijah fell asleep, Marcus opened a cabinet and pulled out an old pair of rubber gloves, a small flashlight, and a handful of spare keys he had tucked away over the years. Not spy gear, but it was all he had. He sat by the window staring out at the city lights, his chest heavy with both fear and a strange thrill. The mission hadn't even begun, but he already knew. One wrong step and it was over. But if he succeeded, it would be the beginning of an entirely new life. Friday night, Harrington & Coburn was eerily quiet. Marcus walked in for his shift as usual, mop in hand, his rickety cart trailing behind. But tonight, he wasn't just a janitor. He was a man about to steal a secret that could shake Wall Street. He waited until the clock struck 11 p.m. The guards rotated shifts. The hallways thinned out. Marcus slowly pushed his cart toward Harrington's office. With every step, his heart pounded like war drums. At the door, he pulled out the spare keys he had hoarded over the years. His trembling hands slid one into the lock. A soft click echoed like a gunshot straight to his chest. He held his breath. Silence. The door creaked open into darkness. Inside was a vast office lined with bookshelves, polished oak desks, and a massive portrait of Harrington glaring down from the wall. Marcus shivered, but stepped inside. He knew what he needed, the hard drive locked in the safe beside the desk. The problem, he didn't have the code. Marcus cursed under his breath and began searching the room. On the desk, in the drawers, through scattered papers, any detail could be the key. Time crawled, every second tightening its grip around his neck. One guard walking by, one camera angled right, and it would all be over. And then, Marcus spotted a sticky note tucked behind a framed photo of Harrington's family on the desk. Scribbled numbers stared back at him. A possible code. Marcus narrowed his eyes, heart racing. This could be the chance, or a deadly trap. Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead, staring at the numbers on the sticky note. His hand trembled as he turned the safe's dial. 3927, a soft click. The safe door cracked open. Marcus held his breath and pulled it wide. Inside were thick folders, and just as RK had said, a sleek silver hard drive tucked inside a protective case. He lifted it carefully, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. This was the evidence, the weapon that could bury Harrington's empire. But just then, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Marcus froze, shoving the hard drive into his coat pocket. He slammed the safe shut, pushed the chair back in place, everything barely tidied in time. The office door swung open. A guard stepped in, flashlight beam sweeping the room. Marcus stood in the middle, pretending to dust the desk. "What are you doing here this late?" The guard barked. Marcus swallowed hard, forcing a weary smile. Mr. Harrington always complains about dust on his desk in the mornings. Thought I'd give it one extra wipe. The guard stared at him for a few tense seconds, then shrugged. "Fine, but finish up and get out. No wandering around here at night." As the door shut, Marcus collapsed into a chair, his shirt soaked in sweat. In his coat pocket, the hard drive felt like a ticking bomb. He knew now. From this moment, he wasn't just an accidental eavesdropper. He was the man holding the secret that could decide the fate of an empire, which also meant his name had just been added to the list of people who had to be eliminated. The next morning, Marcus sat on the subway, his hand buried deep in his coat pocket where the hard drive weighed heavily. Around him, commuters scrolled through their phones or read newspapers, unaware that in this cramped train car sat a janitor holding a secret that could shake all of America. He scanned the faces, his heart pounding faster than usual. Anyone could be watching him. The man in a suit, the woman with a handbag, even a company security officer if fate seated one nearby. Marcus had never felt so small and vulnerable. That evening, over a simple dinner of bread and canned soup, Marcus tried to act normal. But Elijah, sharp as ever, asked, "Dad, why do you look like you're hiding something?" Marcus froze, then ruffled his son's hair with a faint smile. "Just tired, that's all." But inside, he knew the truth. The hard drive wasn't just evidence. It was a double-edged sword. If he found a way to release it, he could take down Harrington. But if he slipped, both he and Elijah would vanish before anyone ever knew. That night, Marcus called RK to report that he had secured the prize. There was a long silence before RK spoke softly. Then the real game begins. Marcus hung up, stood by the window, and stared at the sprawling city lights. In his coat pocket, the hard drive felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. It carried more than just numbers. It carried his fate, Elijah's future, and perhaps the downfall of Harrington and co. Marcus knew the hard drive in his pocket was nothing less than a ticking time bomb. The problem was figuring out how to make it explode at the right time, in the right place, and not in his own coat. The next day, while cleaning near the IT department, Marcus pretended to mop leisurely, but kept glancing. He saw the technicians hunched over their screens, fingers flying across keyboards, and realized, without someone in the trade, he'd never unlock what was inside that drive. That night, he called RK. "I've got the hard drive, but I'm no tech genius. How am I supposed to know what's on it?" There was a pause, then RK replied, "I know someone, a former cybersecurity specialist. He fell out with Harrington after refusing to play along. But to bring him in, Johnson, you'll have to accept a huge risk." Marcus let out a dry laugh. "My whole life's been one risk after another. One more won't make a difference." They set a meeting for the weekend. In Marcus's mind, questions swirled. Could he trust RK? Was this specialist real or just another trap? That night, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, the hard drive resting in front of him. Elijah was fast asleep, while Marcus whispered to himself, "If this truth stays buried, my son will grow up in a world built on lies. But if it comes out, I don't know if either of us will survive it," he sighed heavily. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. There was no turning back now. That weekend, Marcus arrived at the meeting spot RK had given him, a small coffee shop tucked away in a damp alley on the east side of Brooklyn. The place was nearly empty, lit by flickering yellow bulbs and filled with the burnt scent of overbrewed coffee. In the corner sat a thin, weary-looking man. His worn jacket sagged at the shoulders, thick glasses covering sunken eyes. RK introduced briefly. "This is Daniel. He used to run cybersecurity for Harrington. Now he's out, blackballed for refusing to clear the way for Black River." Daniel smirked, his voice rough. "You know, working for the devil means you'll eventually have to choose. Be a partner in crime or disappear. I chose the latter. Lucky for me, I'm still here to tell the tale." Marcus placed the hard drive on the table. The whole room seemed to grow heavier. Daniel stared at it for a long moment, then tapped his fingers lightly. "Everything you need is in here, but cracking it open means they'll know someone touched it. Once I start, there's no turning back." Marcus glanced at RK, then drew a deep breath. He thought of Elijah, of all the sleepless nights worrying about his son's future. Finally, he nodded. "Do it. I've come too far to stop now." Daniel removed his glasses, cleaned them, and slid the hard drive into an old laptop. The fan whirred loudly, the screen flickered to life. Marcus sat frozen, his heartbeat pounding like war drums. He knew this was the defining moment, when the shadows would finally begin to reveal their true face. Daniel's laptop screen flickered, streams of code scrolling endlessly like a maze. Marcus held his breath, every small beep from the machine making his heart jump. "They've layered the encryption," Daniel muttered. "But nothing's perfect. There's always a crack." Suddenly the screen went black, then burst into a list of files. Daniel opened the first one. Inside was a massive ledger. Hundreds of millions funneled through offshore shell companies. Marcus's eyes widened. He didn't understand all the terms, but one thing was clear. This was evidence of money laundering. Daniel kept digging. Another folder revealed a string of emails. Harrington himself, corresponding with politicians, arranging donations in exchange for protection. Marcus gripped the chair so hard his knuckles whitened. This wasn't just financial corruption. It was a dark web of power, a conspiracy tying money and politics in a deadly knot. Daniel looked up, his voice shaking. "You see, Marcus, if this gets out, it won't just be Harrington. The men behind him will be exposed too, but that also means you and your son will be the first targets." Marcus stayed silent, Elijah's innocent smile flashing in his mind. His heart split between fear and the hunger for justice. At last, he nodded, whispering, "We'll find a way. I won't let my boy grow up in a world this dirty." Daniel studied him closely, then turned back to the laptop. The game had changed. Marcus was no longer a janitor piecing scraps together. He was now the keeper of the truth. After the night with Daniel unlocking the hard drive, Marcus felt the world around him shift. Footsteps in the hallways sounded heavier. Security guards' stares lingered longer. Even walking down the street, he felt eyes trailing him. One morning, as he dropped Elijah at school, Marcus spotted a sleek black car parked across the street. Inside, a man in sunglasses pretended to read a newspaper, never flipping a page. When Marcus stared back, the car engine roared to life and drifted away. He forced a smile at his son. "Have fun at school, Elijah. I'll pick you up early." But deep inside, Marcus knew. The game had entered a deadly stage. Harrington must have sensed someone had touched his secret. That night, Marcus called RK. "They're watching me. I saw them outside my son's school. If this keeps up, I can't guarantee Elijah's safety." RK's voice came back, tense. "That's the price of touching Black River. But that's exactly why you have to see it through. If you stop now, they'll erase you immediately." Marcus went silent, glancing into Elijah's room. The boy sat happily scribbling superheroes on a piece of paper. Marcus thought, "He believes I'm a hero. Now I have to become one." He clenched his fists. The fight was no longer a choice. It had arrived at his doorstep. 2 days later, after finishing his shift, Marcus walked into the underground parking lot toward his beat-up car. Something felt wrong. The driver's side window was shattered, the dashboard ripped apart, papers scattered across the seats. On the steering wheel lay a folded note, scrawled in red ink. "Stop, or Elijah is next." Marcus froze. His whole body trembled, his feet rooted to the cold concrete. He looked around, but the garage was empty, echoing with silence. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat by Elijah's bed, watching his son breathe peacefully, torn between terror and rage. Harrington's men had crossed the final line. They had threatened Elijah. The next morning, Marcus called RK, his voice hoarse. "They're going after my son. I swear, if Harrington so much as touches Elijah, I'll drag him down with me, no matter the cost." RK was silent for a long moment before replying. "Johnson, you have to understand, this isn't cat and mouse anymore. You've become a real threat to Harrington, and he won't stop until you're erased." Marcus gripped the phone tighter, his eyes burning red. He knew he was plunging deeper into the abyss. But at the same time, something fierce rose inside him. No longer just curiosity or ambition. It was the survival instinct of a father. Marcus knew if he stayed passive, both he and Elijah would soon end up as victims. To protect his son, he had no choice but to strike first. In the following days, he quietly studied Harrington's habits. Harrington had one peculiar routine. Every Thursday night, he left the office earlier than usual to attend an exclusive midtown club for the elite. There, he mingled with politicians and financial tycoons, where billion-dollar deals were sealed over glasses of wine. Marcus relayed this to RK and Daniel. Daniel pressed, "If we can record what's said in there, conversations, deals, it would be the perfect piece to complement the data on the hard drive." Marcus nodded. He knew the plan was insanely risky. That club was heavily guarded, guests thoroughly vetted. A janitor had no place there, but Marcus gave a bitter smile. "My whole life, I've ended up in places people said I didn't belong. This won't be any different." That night, he pulled out an old suit jacket, the one he had worn only once, on his wedding day long ago. The shoulders were frayed, a bit too tight, but when Marcus slipped it on and looked in the mirror, he saw something else. Not just a janitor, but a man ready to walk into the lion's den. Elijah ran in, laughing. "Dad, you look so fancy. Where are you going?" Marcus knelt, hugged his son tight, and whispered, "I'm going to take back our future." Thursday night, the New York air was freezing, the wind lashing his face. Marcus stood across the street, adjusted his worn suit jacket, took a deep breath, and walked toward the luxurious club Harrington frequented. At the entrance, 2 massive guards blocked the way. Marcus approached, his heart pounding. One guard held out his hand. "Membership card?" Marcus froze. But just then, RK, disguised in an elegant suit, appeared and threw an arm around Marcus as if they were old acquaintances. "He's with me," RK said firmly. The guards glanced, then nodded, letting them through. Marcus stepped inside, barely believing he had cleared the first hurdle. Inside was another world, soft golden light, crystal glasses swirling with red wine, the laughter of men in $1,000 suits. Marcus felt like the only soul in the room who hadn't sold himself to money. In the corner sat Harrington, surrounded by politicians and tycoons. His voice rumbled smooth yet dripping with arrogance. "Black River flows exactly as planned. No one can touch us." Marcus clenched his fist, while Daniel, blending in with a concealed recording device, gave a subtle nod. That night, Marcus didn't just walk into the lion's den, he carried hope with him. The hard drive's evidence, combined with Harrington's own words, could become the fatal blow. But he also knew, one slip, and this would be the last night he ever walked out alive. Inside the club, the air grew heavier. Marcus sat at a table by the wall, trying to appear calm, though every sense was strung tight. Before him, men in expensive suits raised glasses, laughing about $100 million deals as if discussing lunch plans. Across the room, Harrington leaned toward a silver-haired politician, his voice low but clear enough for his circle to hear. "Black River isn't just money. It's power. Anyone who stands against us will be crushed." Marcus heard every word, his hand clenching under the table until his nails nearly broke skin. Each sentence Harrington spoke was captured by Daniel's tiny microphone hidden in a shirt button. Suddenly, Harrington lifted his head, his piercing gaze sweeping the room. Marcus stiffened. For a heartbeat, It felt as if Harrington's eyes locked directly on him. His heart pounded wildly, but Harrington soon turned back, laughing again as if nothing had happened. Still, Marcus knew, predators rarely make mistakes. Harrington might not be certain, but he smelled danger close by. Marcus sipped his wine, forcing composure. He thought, just a little more. One more word, one more piece of proof from his own mouth, and everything changes. Tonight, he was no longer an invisible janitor. He was a man sitting in the devil's den, listening to confessions disguised as fine wine. Marcus tried to stay calm, but sweat trickled down his temple. Every time Harrington laughed, it felt like the sound pierced straight through his chest. From a nearby table, Daniel subtly dipped his head, signaling, "We've got enough." Marcus nodded slightly, preparing to leave. But just then, one of Harrington's bodyguards stepped over, his heavy hand landing on Marcus's shoulder. "Friend," the guard sneered, "I don't recall seeing you here before. New member?" Marcus swallowed hard, feeling every gaze in the room settle on him. He had to think fast. Leaning back in his chair, he forced a thin smile. "Oh, just a guest, tagging along with a friend. Probably a little out of place in a crowd like this." The guard narrowed his eyes. The room seemed to fall silent, as if everyone was listening. Harrington glanced over, raising an eyebrow. In that instant, Marcus knew one slip and everything would vanish. The hard drive, the recordings, all of it would mean nothing if he didn't make it out alive. Daniel coughed lightly, interjecting, "He's with me. Problem with that?" The guard stared a few more seconds, then smirked coldly. "No, just curious." He walked away, but Marcus's heart continued hammering, ready to burst. He knew the mask was cracking. Harrington and his circle wouldn't take long to realize an outsider had slipped into their world. The room fell quiet after the run-in with the bodyguard. Marcus sipped his wine, trying to stay calm, though his heart still pounded wildly. Harrington, like an old lion sensing something foreign, slowly turned his head toward Marcus. His smile remained, but his eyes gleamed with icy suspicion. Raising his glass, he stared directly at Marcus, and suddenly spoke. "And who is our new guest? I don't recall seeing you in our club before." Every gaze landed on Marcus. The atmosphere grew suffocating. Even the background music seemed to fade. Marcus swallowed hard, forcing a thin smile. "Oh, just an old friend brought me here. Truly an honor to be in the company of the most powerful men in the city." Harrington laughed, the sound echoing like blades against Marcus's ears. He rose, walking slowly toward him. "Power, yes? You're right. But power has one rule. Those who don't belong are eliminated." Marcus clenched his fist beneath the table, cold sweat trickling down his back. From across the room, Daniel discreetly adjusted his recorder, his eyes darting with worry. In that moment, Marcus knew. He had become prey under Harrington's gaze, and prey has only two choices: run or fight back. Harrington stood inches from Marcus, his eyes sharp as blades. The club fell silent, the only sound the faint clink of crystal glasses from a nearby table. "Who are you?" Harrington asked bluntly, his voice stripped of all pretense. Marcus drew a deep breath. He knew if he stayed silent or lied, he would die right there. So he chose to gamble. He lifted his head, locked eyes with Harrington, and said, "Just a father, trying to give his son a future cleaner than the filth you're spreading." The room froze. Some faces looked shocked, others scoffed. But Harrington didn't laugh. He stared at Marcus, as if trying to devour him whole. At that moment, Daniel pressed a button, broadcasting the recordings live to a secure server. Every arrogant word, every damning phrase from Harrington was now beyond erasure. One bodyguard lunged for Marcus, but Marcus moved faster, knocking over a wine glass and bolting for the door as chaos erupted. Chairs crashed, shouts rang out, but Marcus kept running, his heart blazing with the truth he had just unleashed. Out in the cold New York night, he stopped to catch his breath, gazing at the city lights above. The hard drive was still in his coat pocket, safe, and the evidence had already slipped from Harrington's grasp. His phone buzzed. A message from RK. "We did it. Brace for the storm. But from now on, you're no longer invisible." Marcus closed his eyes, a bitter smile spreading. He knew the dangers ahead were far from over. But tonight, he was no longer just a janitor. He was a father who stood up. and the man who made Harrington's empire tremble for the first time.